Yeah. Put it on. Negotiate what you're gonna do. Yeah.
Sarah's on, and then Jeff will be on in a minute. Or any minute. Whenever.
Are we right? I'll call to order the Wood Village City Council meeting for October 24th, 2023. And with that, we will read our land acknowledgement statement. And I believe Councillor Tan's going to read that tonight.
The Chinookan peoples known as the Clackamas and Cascades are the indigenous people of the land now inhabited by the city of Wood Village and the other areas of Columbia River. The village of Nechockley was located near today's Blue Lake Park. Ancestral life of these peoples included a seasonal round of resource gathering and stewardship from the Wapato fields and fishing areas of the Columbia River to the cedar and huckleberry gathering areas of the High Cascades. Introduced disease from early settlers dramatically reduced the number of these people. They signed the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855 with the United States government and were forcibly removed to the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation. We thank the descendants of these tribes for being the original stewards and protectors of these lands since time immemorial. We also acknowledge the systematic policies and genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many Indigenous Native American families today. We're honored by the collective work of many Native nations, leaders, and families who are demonstrating resilience, resistance, revitalization, healing, and creativity. We're honored to be guests upon these lands.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any citizens' comments called in or no?
Nope.
No
Called in.
written statements. Okay, thank you. We'll move to the presentation from the East Metro Resolution Center. Is that virtual?
Yes, that is virtual. We have Tara Cleland, who runs that department. It's out of the city of Gresham, but it involves the 4 area cities. And there's Tara right there to talk about the good work they've been doing. It's been a little bit since we've had a council presentation on it, probably due to COVID and things, but certainly the center has been very active during that time. And Tara, please take it away.
Tara,
Awesome.
welcome. Nice to have you with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me and having me virtually. I really appreciate that. I'm loving the new space there. Greg was kind enough to take me on a tour. So pretty cool stuff. Happy to tell you about East County resolutions. As Greg said, we serve all of East Multnomah County, Gresham, Fairview, Troutdale, Wood Village, and unincorporated East Multnomah County as well. And our primary service, the one that is most helpful to our community members, is our community mediation. So when we provide community mediation, we're talking about bringing neighbors together, bringing roommates together, bringing landlord and tenants together, anybody who's willing to have a conversation about whatever issues they may be facing. We're bringing them together to help them have a peaceful, respectful, productive conversation about the issues, right? And we do that through having impartial mediators who do not give advice. They don't make judgments. They don't decide who's right or wrong. They're there to help people have a productive conversation that's really focused on what do you need to change and how can tomorrow be better, right? Because when I got into this field, I thought I would make a really great mediator because I'm really good at telling people what to do. And it turns out that's not at all what we do. And when we can empower community members to make their own agreements with one another to help them work through their problems, turns out they're more likely to follow through with a mediated agreement that they've come up with. They're more likely to follow through with that than a court order, right? Because they had the power and the control to actually make that agreement happen. And there's no pressure to make agreements. And yet 98% of our mediations, people who actually meet in a mediation meeting, agree at least on some of the issues. They reach agreements. So it's pretty cool stuff. I know for Wood Village, I'm not sure if you had the fiscal year highlights. If not, I'll send that out right after this meeting to Greg to send out. So Wood Village is a smaller town. So we don't serve as many people as we would say City of Gresham, for example. And the service is always there for anybody in Wood Village who needs it, who has even like eviction prevention stuff, right? Anything where coming together and having a conversation and being able to negotiate terms to make things better, we can help with that. So what Wood Village has been taking advantage of in the past to really make the best bang for their buck is our training. So all Wood Village employees can take any of our trainings. We do a 3-day conflict management training. We'll do full-day facilitation trainings, and we do 52-hour basic mediation training. All of those are free to all City of Wood Village employees. And we've come in and we've done diversity, equity, inclusion training for Wood Village staff. And we've done de-escalation and conflict management training that was specific for Wood Village staff as well. So we can come in and find a good day and time and timeline that works really well for staff to give them direct training. And I praise training. I mean, that's the highest thing on my list. I enjoy doing that the most, and also appreciate the impact on the people, because we can mediate and help people build bridges in their community. And if we can teach them those skills themselves, how they can de-escalate situations before they become really big problems, right? So saving time, saving those relationships that could get worse down the road because they're being given those skills early on. Some of the other programs that we do, so we have a second home program that I'll share, because I think it's a really important program, and we're always looking for more home providers. So the second home program is a partnership with East County Resolutions, with Reynolds School District and Gresham Barlow School District, and Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. So between those partnerships, we help mediate agreements between homeless high school students and volunteer home providers in our community. So we need volunteer home providers from all of East County so that they can be close to these students' home schools, to keep them in the same school district that they're already in, or the same high schools that they're already in. And so we help mediate house rules, right? So everything from whose responsibility is it to do the dishes or cook dinner, or what does all of that look like? Kind of everything that I wish I had when I had a college roommate. I wish I'd had this like housing rules and expectations agreement, so we could avoid some problems down the road. It's all voluntary, which means the home provider is not getting money. They're not getting paid. Their payment is the student going to school every day and graduating, right? And this program has been incredibly successful. We have one home provider who has now housed 3 students, 2 of them through graduation, which has been amazing to see, because not all students qualify for this kind of program. They have to be, high achieving. They have to be students that if they just had a safe place to be able to go every day, to finish their schoolwork, to eat, to go to bed, and they knew it was going to be there again tomorrow, that they will succeed. So they're recommended by their school counselors, by their teachers. And then home providers who are voluntary get to meet with the kiddos before agreeing to match with them, right? So that's a whole process of kind of getting to know the teen and what they need and what they're expecting from that relationship. And then mediation comes in and we support that. We also create a lease agreement. In the state of Oregon, you can be 16 or 15 and pregnant and legally sign your own lease agreement. So again, rent is $0 that the student agrees to attend school and graduate school successfully, which has been the case in so many of these placements. So I'm pitching that out there. If anybody who hears this thinks, gosh, I don't know if I could be a home provider, just reach out and I can tell you so much more about it. It's not like fostering a youth. You are not their parent, right? It's like, bringing in the neighborhood kiddo who needs some extra support, and mediation is there all along the way to help support any kind of wonky issues that might pop up and make those uncomfortable conversations a little more comfortable. We also do the Oregon Foreclosure Avoidance Program. So banks of a certain size have to mediate before they can foreclose on a property owner. And we do this for all of East Multnomah County. And we took on some Clackamas cases because their program stopped providing that service. So we're, even do out Sandy and boring and stuff as well sometimes. So about half of these mediations result in the homeowner being able to stay in their home, which, a 50% success rate on the surface, I think doesn't sound super great. Unless you think about the housing crash where everybody just loses their home, right? That banks are talking way above a homeowner's scale. They aren't checking all of the correct boxes for the homeowner to qualify for a foreclosure avoidance measure. So mediation comes in and makes sure that the bank is doing all the things they're supposed to do and that the homeowner understands the process and what they're going to do next. So that's 50% of homeowners that are keeping their homes that wouldn't have if the program didn't exist. They would have just been foreclosed on, right? So I believe wildly successful, particularly for the people that can keep their homes. And even for the ones who can't, meaning that they just don't have the income, they don't have the ability to ever come current on their loan. So they don't qualify for a foreclosure measure. Even for them, there are programs and the bank can make agreements to delay foreclosure, to give them a month or 2 months or 3 months to get all of their things in order so they can get out of the home. There's programs called Cash for Keys where they can get quite the lump sum for being able to move into a new place as long as they move out of this home and keep it in the condition that it's in. So at the very least, even when they can't retain their homes, they leave the meeting understanding what's going to happen next and having time to be able to plan so that they can move on to their next chapter and have some sense of like what that's going to be like for them. So another really successful program. I feel like I've shared a lot so far, and I know that I talk quickly. So I want to check in. Are there any questions from anyone or anything that you want to hear more about?
I just do want to point out the annual report was in your packet. So that was in there if you had a chance to review it. And we internally use the service mostly, when you think code enforcement, gee, the neighbor's parking in front of my house. That doesn't fall under code enforcement. My neighbor's leaves are falling in my yard. That's not code enforcement. And that's where the East County Resolutions is a great tool that we refer a lot of people to for those types of things.
Kara, I'm guessing you have, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
You have like language interpretation services or I'm wondering about accessibility and interpretation services if needed, and also how our neighbors would access your program. Like, would you want them to email you or your website?
Yeah, great. So I think I heard for questions, I heard, what does accessibility look like, particularly around languages? And then the other piece was like, how do people access our service? So yes, we have like a language support line. If somebody calls and they're speaking another language, I can put them on hold and then connect a service that will help identify, if I don't already know, will help identify what language they're speaking and get somebody on the line who can speak and help interpret. And then when we do mediations, we just had one a couple of weeks ago where we can hire an interpreter if somebody needs it. And I will say, just because I have the platform to say so, I know there's a lot of neighbors who will say, oh, they're just saying that they don't speak English now because they don't want to deal with the problem. And I'll say for a lot of people where English is your second language, when things get stressful, when you're dealing with conflict and English is not your first language, it can be really challenging, right? So it's easier for them to speak their language in order to process things better, in order to make sure they're getting their point across clear. So it's not like people just forget. It's that when they're in high conflict situations, they really need that extra support. So it helps you understand them as well, and they can understand you better. So yes, so we have interpreter services from just on the phone if we need it quickly, to hiring somebody and scheduling them to be in the meeting with us. And our mediators are trained on how to work with interpreters to make that kind of the smoothest process for the parties involved. And then how do you reach out to us? All of the ways. So anybody can email us, mediate@greshamoregon.gov. You can call us 503-618-3247. You can click on our website and look at upcoming trainings or opportunities, which also has our phone number and email on there as well. So any way folks want to reach out to us, then please do that. Even if you're not sure that this is the service for you. And like I said, community mediation is free to the community. As long as you're in our service area, it's completely free. It's totally voluntary. So I tell people, like, what do you got to lose except for maybe an hour or two of your time to try it? And if both people are willing, or more than two people are willing to participate, means that folks are willing to volunteer their time to try to work something out together, which is part of why this is so successful. Did that answer your questions?
It did. Thank you. You did.
Other questions, council?
I just want to say I appreciate the comment you just made on, English being your second language and under stressful situations, not that you forget, but doing it in your native language always comes easier, because I think that is, a thought some people have. And so I appreciate you making that comment. And, maybe I think we've talked about doing something like highlighting folks in our newsletter. So maybe, during the time we can do a little highlight of their services to our community members, saying that, hey, you don't have to have a reason through the city to do it, but you can reach out to them on your own. And here's kind of how. And again, highlighting the language support line and things like that I think it's important.
And we typically a few times a year in our newsletter promote East County resolutions, whether it's upcoming trainings, workshops, or just like we need to fill this square. Let's again remind people that this is a service that's available to them at no charge.
Tara, I had a question. Is all your money fundraised, or is there any county or other sources of revenue?
Yes, thank you for that question. So where does our money come from? So Wood Village pitches in $1,575 a year. And then Fairview, Troutdale, and Gresham all also pitch in financial support. And that's all part of a internal government agreement that we have each year that we've had for I think like 20 years. I've been there 10, so it's been a while. So that's a little portion of it. A lot of our money comes from through the U of O from the state. So the state legislature gives a pot of money that gets separated to all 14 community dispute resolution centers in Oregon, and we're one of them. And that's those 14 centers are called Resolution Oregon. And I'll add here, if there was anybody watching who's not a Wood Village city resident or doesn't work in Wood Village, just give us a call, because there are centers providing the same free service all over Oregon. So wherever you are, if you have a family member or friend, you can still reach out to me and I'll help connect you with the service that will work for you. So we get state funding. We get funding from each of the towns and cities that we service. And then we have a contract with Child Welfare, where we provide facilitation services for their family decision meetings, which impact quite a few East County kiddos who've been removed from their homes. And this is only working with parents who are trying to get their kiddos back. So we help facilitate the meetings with parents, with their support people, with their attorneys, with caseworkers, kind of the whole group of folks that are trying to reunite the family. And then we help make sure that the family's on track for getting their kiddos back, that they understand what tasks they need to be doing, and then really leading with a strengths-based approach, right? What are they doing well, and how are visitations going, and how are their kids doing? So that's quite a large contract that we have with Child Welfare that funds quite a bit of our services as well. And then finally, our other big chunk of money comes from the Oregon Housing Division. And that's for work that we do with the manufactured and marina communities. So there's Senate Bill 586 made mandatory mediation for manufactured and marina communities between landlords and tenants. Or if a tenant is bringing landlords bringing mediation between two tenants. So that's a mandatory program. We got a good chunk of money for supporting all of the marina and manufactured communities in all of East County. I think those are probably our biggest grants that support the
Yeah,
work.
well, thank you very much. Certainly our contribution is money well spent from Wood Village. If we can train staff with the contribution and do that service, that in itself is well worth the money.
Well,
So
Mayor, I might point out that Greg took this program probably 15 years ago
I
or
think
better.
12 or 13. I was trying to think when I took the full mediator training about 12 or 13 years ago, which was a great just introductory. It's quite in depth of what they all do. I also want to point out we advocated for funding at this last legislative session for those 14 centers. And I do believe that was successful in getting the centers additional funding for the works that they're doing.
well, Tara, I'll tell you, your enthusiasm itself ought to help drive this program. And if there's anything else we can do to help promote, we're doing our regular mailings in the newsletter. But if there's anything else that comes to mind right now that we could do, you've just given the council good information. If there's anything comes to mind, Tara?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your support. I appreciate being able to come here and present with all of you and take a little bit of your time. And I just ask people to, you know, if you hear a neighbor, friend, colleague talk about a difficult situation, to think of mediation first, right? Because even if it doesn't come to a mediation where people are at the table, we can provide conflict coaching. Right? In one phone call, we can help you think about the conflict a little bit differently. That might be really helpful in the long run. So think about mediation first, rather than like a final last resort.
You just made me think of a neighbor of mine that might be a mother and a senior in high school that might get some, might have some use there. So thank you. Any other questions from council? Tara, thank you very much, and good luck here as you move forward.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Next item on our agenda is the update on homeless services.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My part's going to be relatively brief to start this because we do have members from the Hope team here that are going to talk more in depth about what they do, what they're seeing, just, you know, out in the field, say limitations, constraints, and then, you know, resources we need. So what we hope to do, again, here in just a minute, time available, we'll then talk about some other things because we do have another guest here on the next presentation. I'll be respectful of their time and allow you all time to ask questions of the Hope team and really dive deep into the work that they're doing and the needs that they have. So with that, I want to close this presentation temporarily and open up theirs. And so with us this evening, we have Captain Asbo, he's head of it, and then Sergeant Gerkman, who's definitely on the ground every day. We have a great relationship with both of them, the full team of the Hope team. John, Mary, you know, they know how to get a hold of them for those in need. So with that, I'll turn it over to them.
You want to go? Is there some?
My son's out there making
there's-
faces at me.
Oh, sure.
Evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm Captain Doug Asbo. I am captain of patrol operations at the sheriff's office. Part of that duty is supervising the Hope team. I started out with the Hope team several years ago as a sergeant supervising the Hope team. Then I became a lieutenant supervising the Hope team, and now I'm a captain supervising the Hope. So I've been with the Hope team for quite a while. I'll let Sergeant Gerkman introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Brian Gerkman. I'm the sergeant on the Hope team currently. I've been on the team for about 3 years, and I took over as the sergeant after Captain Asbo got promoted.
So what we'd like to do tonight is kind of just give you a little overview of the work that the Hope team does, and then talk about a few of the challenges that we find in working with our houseless community members. And then most importantly, I think, give you all an opportunity to ask some questions. So the Hope team was established in 2017. It was basically an idea of the sheriff at the time and the Board of County Commissioners. And they initially started out funding it with one-time funds. And we just kept getting those one-time funds because of the work that was being done. And now it's fully funded by the sheriff's office. There's currently 2 deputies and a sergeant assigned to the HOPE team. We could certainly use a lot more, but that's what we are funded for currently. There's so far, they've made around 800 contacts with individuals experiencing houselessness, and they've made over 600 formal referrals to services. And their mindset when they're out there working is really that building a rapport and building a relationship with the community members they serve. They are really dedicated to not only helping people that are in a bad situation or experiencing houselessness to get connected to services. I can tell you, in doing this for a lot of years, it's difficult for me with all the resources I have to navigate the service system. So I can imagine that it would be exceptionally difficult for someone who may not have all those resources at hand. Of course, they treat all individuals with dignity and respect. They are an outreach first organization, so their goal is not to go out and make a lot of arrests and give a lot of citations. Their primary function is to go out and contact individuals and get them connected to services that are appropriate for them. They do promote low impact camping, and we'll talk a little bit more about what low impact camping is in just a second here. Go ahead. I'll let you tell about what you guys.
Yeah. So what we do, I'm not so much going to read off of the slide as just kind of give you what I like to tell people. We see, one, like Captain Asbo said, we're an outreach organization. And then 2, we want to provide equitable police access for the houseless population. So 1, we are going out there, we're getting to know those community members. We're trying to build that rapport, the trust and relationship that is required to understand what those barriers are that they're experiencing and help them conquer those barriers. Sometimes it's as simple as maybe an ID, a cell phone, could be as big as mental health treatment and or addiction. So that takes a long time being uniformed police officers to try and build those bridges. Obviously, there's been a strained relationship between law enforcement and the houseless community, I think probably for decades across the country, and we're just trying to repair some of those bridges. As far as the equitable police access, we believe everybody's community should be patrolled by law enforcement. People should be comfortable flagging down law enforcement and having a conversation about livability issues. But we believe that's the same thing in our encampments. They want safe and secure living environments, and we're trying to help provide that, as well as hold that door open for when they say they are ready to start down the path for a better life. We will help them get into those programs, or at least in touch with people that can get them into those programs that can help them effectively. We'll also work with stakeholders in the community. We see ourselves as kind of the bridge between the housed and the unhoused. There's a lot of stigma that goes both ways. And so we try and keep those open lines of communication. We'll try and represent the unhoused to the housed and the housed to the unhoused. So we will go to these camps and say, these are the issues that you're causing in this neighborhood. It could be noise issues, maybe trash. It could just be where they're parked at that particular time. And we'll try and mitigate those issues as best we can. But we reverse that and we try and dispel some of the myths to the housed community. The unhoused get blamed for nearly every single crime that gets occurred. And that's not the case. They're not the ones committing every single crime. So we just try and be that conduit between the two communities. We also respond to calls for service involving houselessness when we're working. So we will still go to 911 calls, and most of our calls come from our email, which we'll give you later, that many community members have. So they'll reach out to the team directly. And we work cooperatively with outreach partners, more outreach partners than I can count, but specifically an East County navigation team. That is a team made up of social service providers. Some specialize in housing, addiction, mental health treatment, and we partner up with that team to try and get people into the correct services. So we know that camping is going to exist in Multnomah County. As of right now, I believe there's somewhere between 12 and 1,300 beds in Multnomah County, and probably somewhere around 5,000 homeless people. So camping is going to exist. So we acknowledge that and we're trying to make the camping as low impactful as possible. This is an example of a camp where we worked with this person to gain that voluntary compliance after building a relationship to get that camp cleaned up and to keep it clean for as long a period of time as possible. So that is kind of our approach when we have a camp with an issue, is to build that relationship first. And then hopefully we can bring in that cooperative cleanups with the person, the camper on board. So it's not so much enforcement based.
And I just wanted to add in to what Sergeant Gerkman is saying, that voluntary compliance that the Hope team is able to get is so important, because we know that houselessness is not something that we can arrest our way out of or fine our way out of or give citations to get out of. So that voluntary compliance and those relationships that they build to gain that is critical to the work that they're doing.
I would also say builds some responsibility from the campers to improve their own self and the area they live in. So it builds a foundation for responsible behavior.
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on a few of the things that are challenges as we work with the houseless community, and some of our guiding principles as we work with the houseless community. Number one, there's a couple of case laws that specifically direct how law enforcement will interact with our houseless community members. One of those, and the primary one, is Martin versus Boise. And essentially Martin versus Boise established that when we are unable to provide housing or some type of alternative shelter, that we cannot give citations or arrest an individual that is sleeping outdoors in the public. And so essentially, if we don't have a shelter bed to put someone in, we cannot issue them a citation or arrest them. And as Sergeant Gerkman pointed out, when we have roughly 5,000 individuals experiencing houselessness in Multnomah County and only about 12 to 1,300 beds, we're certainly going to have people that we don't have housing available for. In addition to that, we have a case, actually two cases out of Grants Pass, which reaffirmed that Boise decision, and that's Johnson versus Grants Pass and Blake versus Grants Pass. And basically very similar situations that occurred in Oregon to the situation that occurred in Boise. And that court also reaffirmed that Martin versus Boise was the appropriate decision. We also have a couple of recent House bills that became law that impact how we work with our houseless community members. One was House Bill 3124. And then the other one was House Bill 3115, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. 3124 basically outlines how we will post camps and how we will manage the cleanups of camps of existing camps. And it basically gives us very specific direction on how long we should post a camp, the appropriate ways to do that posting, and then how we will store property from those camps after that posting's occurred. House Bill 3115 is basically what's established kind of this newer concept of time, place, and manner, and essentially said that cities and counties can't establish any just blanket no camping ordinances. And it really indicated that all camping ordinances by cities and counties had to include some kind of time, place, and manner of how someone could be outdoors. So as I'm sure you're aware, the city of Portland now has a time, place, and manner ordinance, as does the city of Beaverton, the city of Troutdale, and a number of other cities are looking at different variations of a time, place, and manner ordinance.
Is that the 8-8? I think it's 8-8 in Portland.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's important to note Portland is being sued for that ordinance, which a lot of other cities kind of base their drafts off of. So that's something we've been looking at, waiting to see what gets adjudicated out on the other end, so we don't have to go through that same process.
And that is always a challenge with new laws that take place, is there's frequently a lot of gray area in those. And until a court has made a decision and established some kind of court-supported standard, those are open to lawsuits. So I think this is kind of the start of that. And as it references 3115, Portland's going to be the start of what that looks like. And there'll be some what is appropriate when establishing time, place, and manner. One of the big challenges, and I know this is impactful not only for our houseless community members, but for our house community members, is the challenges with individuals who are living in RVs, either motorhomes or trailers or similar. And what we have found is that we can't just treat it as a vehicle. So all those ordinances that impact how we would normally deal with an abandoned vehicle or a derelict vehicle, we have to take into consideration the fact that individuals are actually living inside that vehicle. It's not against the law to stay inside a vehicle when that vehicle's been cited for any particular city ordinance violation. Certainly, we can't tow a vehicle with somebody who's living inside of it. So again, that becomes one of those areas where that voluntary compliance is so critical when our HOPE team's able to go out and establish a relationship with that individual and get them to move to an area that is less impactful to the community around them. But with that being said, there is not a lot of places for people to go and park RVs. It becomes particularly challenging. RVs are hard to hide. They stand out. They do have a big impact on the housed community, but there's not a lot of places to send people. So when the HOPE team's out talking to people, the challenge becomes they're willing to move, but there's nowhere we can direct them to move to. The other thing is that in the last few years, the tow companies realized what a great expense it was to dispose of those RVs when they're towed and the owner chooses not to pick them up. So on average, it's about $3,000 to $5,000 to dispose of an RV the appropriate way and deal with all the hazardous materials that are involved in disposing of an RV. So the tow company said, we are not going to just come out and pick those up anymore and hope that we get reimbursed somehow. Their expectation is now that they be paid in advance for any of those tows. So they're paid at the time of the tow. So one of the challenges is that most cities and counties don't have any kind of funding set aside to manage that or to account for those tows that may occur under their city ordinances or county ordinances. And it doesn't take many $3,000 to $5,000 tows to get way up there in price. So again, that's another focus as the HOPE team is looking at how we address a RV that may be parked on the side of, and it may be having some impact on the community around it. One of their considerations is just purely fiscal responsibility and being responsible to each of the communities that are contract cities for us when we look at towing that, because we know that that's going to cost the city that $3,000 to $5,000. So again, they're looking for that voluntary compliance. And at the end of the day, it's a long process when somebody's living inside an RV to either find that person some other alternative housing or to find someplace else for them to put that RV. And frankly, a lot of those folks aren't willing even to take alternative housing and move out of their RV, because a lot of times we're giving them the hope at something maybe and asking them to give up what they have currently. So it's kind of akin to asking you to move out of your house and maybe I'll find something for you down the road. So it is very challenging as we work with those folks that are living in RVs. On this section of the slide, it just has our hope@mcso email address that goes out to all members of the HOPE team. And that's available to community members, to anybody who may need it. If somebody knows somebody experiencing houselessness, or they're having some challenges with somebody experiencing houselessness, or if they're houseless themselves, they can certainly use that. That is the primary way that the HOPE team gets information and builds ideas of where people are and they can go and make contact with them. So that is certainly, you can pass that out as much as you like.
Just today, we learned of a new camp in Village because of the email.
And at that point, I'll wrap up my portion of the presentation and I'll open up to questions from the.
Council?
I do have a question. When you, just so when I'm talking to my neighbors, so when someone's living in a car, and it's gonna be towed, like it's broken down maybe, and they're with it, they can't be towed, right? Like you can't take it away. But if they go to work, is that, you know what I mean? If they leave the vehicle, then it can be towed?
So if you're talking about a car,
Yes,
like a
sorry.
normal passenger car.
Yep.
Yes, it could be towed. We obviously can't tow it while it's occupied. It could be towed. But, we have to think about the end result of that tow and the fact that probably the person's worldly belongings are inside that vehicle. So we have to be thoughtful and compassionate to the fact that if we tow that vehicle, where does that leave that person when they come home from work? And particularly if it's somebody who's working, and in this day and age, I'm sure you can all appreciate the cost of rent and the cost of moving into a place. We have a number of people who are experiencing houselessness that we work with that work every day, make pretty decent money. They just can't come up with the $5,000 to $10,000 it takes to move into a place, and that getting started. And they may even have the money to pay a monthly rent, but that getting started money is difficult. But the short answer to your question is yes, if a vehicle is unoccupied, then we could tow it just as we normally would. Let me correct that. If a car is unoccupied, we could tow it just as we normally would. The RVs are a little more challenging.
But if we know someone's living out of it, there could be other options to.
Certainly, if there's a vehicle and you know someone to be living out of it, that would certainly be something that the Hope team would want to know about, because they'd want to make contact with that person and see if we could start finding some alternatives or see what their barriers to being housed were.
How would you know if that a vehicle's being housed in as opposed to they just are a hoarder and they have stuff in their car? How do you validate that?
I'll let you. Out there.
Yeah, make sure I understand the question. How can we tell between a vehicle that someone's living in as opposed to just full of belongings? It's just going to be repetition and going out there. We go out there at various different times of the day. I'll even ask night shift to stop by and see if somebody's sleeping. Same thing happens with camps, because we need to determine if a camp is occupied or abandoned, and we'll take pictures and go back and see if it's exactly the same in the next couple of days. As well as we'll run the plate, try and get a hold of the registered owner. We'll even knock on doors if it's parked in front of a residence to see if they're aware, if they've seen anybody coming in and out of the vehicle. So there's a few various ways we could try and confirm that.
And a lot of times there are some pretty obvious signs. If there is bedding, clear evidence of bedding inside a vehicle, or food, those kind of, most people don't leave food in their vehicle, even if they're storing belongings in their vehicle. So we'll look for some of those kind of key signs that somebody's actually living inside the vehicle. And as the sergeant said, follow-up visits will kind of bear out whether somebody's actually living in it or if it's just been abandoned.
And then you had mentioned building rapport with some of the homeless, and how often do you build that, get to that point where you're building the rapport, and how often those visits, if it continues to be an issue? I'm not sure whatever issue that is, but let's say it's an ongoing issue and that individual doesn't comply.
I think the Hope team has been incredibly successful in relationship building, gaining that voluntary compliance. So in most of the time, they've built a relationship to the point where just merely asking somebody to make some adjustment in their camp or adjustment in where they're staying is often enough if the person has the means to do. And frequently, if they don't have the means, the Hope team will look to see if they have the means to assist that person in moving to that place. What I will tell you is building that relationship is the difficult part. We know that on average, it takes about 9 contacts with an individual before we actually start to build a rapport with them. And we have to keep in mind that, number one, historically, the relationship between law enforcement and houseless community has not been good. And secondly, they've been let down a lot by social service providers and outreach workers and others. So it's, one of the key components to what the Hope team does is be reliable. And they come back and they see you when they say they're going to come back and see you. And if they say that they're going to make something happen for an individual, they make that happen, because that's part of that relationship building.
And to give kind of a specific example without being too specific, I'm sure most of you are aware of some vehicles nearish by that don't seem to move. They actually do move about every week or so. Again, mostly thanks to the Hope team with that relationship, which I'll call follows the spirit of our municipal code in terms of you can't store, vehicles and other property on the street. So they do move. They're in the same general area, but they do move. And so that's part of, again, at least they're not in a place I think we'd all prefer them to be a little more successful and not living on the street. They're also, doing some things that allow us to then do other code enforcement stuff. So when you go to a house person and they're storing their stuff on the street, we could say, well, you need to move it. And they can't say, well, they're not. So that's something also that we try to work with. It may not look like stuff moves, but stuff moves around.
And I think one of the other important notes to that is that although often it's going to take longer than one would like to get some of these vehicles moved, part of the process is immediately as they begin to establish that relationship, they start identifying what the individual's barriers to being housed are, whether that be addiction or mental health or medical issues. And so in the time that they're working to get that vehicle moved, they're also working to get that individual into the appropriate resources to address those barriers. So there's kind of 2 things going on at once, and we're hopeful that one will help them to do the other. So if we're asking them to move the vehicle, maybe getting into mental health, some mental health treatment might assist in that or give them the ability to do that. Or at times it's just been a matter of money, and we've connected with organizations that have been able to buy tires for individuals, or buy car batteries, or buy a small amount of fuel to get them to the next place. So the reasons people are where they're at are endless. Everybody's got some individual reason they are where they are. And so really it's the Hope team's job to kind of meet with people and put that puzzle together.
I have a couple questions on the, when you're talking, excuse me, down payment to get into an apartment, and those are steep. We do offer, the county has vouchers for rent. Is there any way that there could be vouchers for help with somebody that you, for example, that has a job, has some money, could pay the rent, but can't meet the down payment? Is there ways in which the county can rethink just the voucher process and allow that to apply for down payments? Has that been ever a discussion? Or?
So right now, the county is working on a new initiative. It's called the House Multnomah Now Initiative, and it's in collaboration with the Governor's Oregon All In Initiative. And so that does have some money earmarked for paying for up to a year of rent for people as they move into a place. It's a housing first ideology. So the idea is that they're going to get people into housing immediately or as quickly as possible. And then they're going to start addressing maybe some of those barriers or some of those things that caused them to become houseless in the first place. So I guess the short answer is yes, there are funds available for that.
And I'm just talking about the down payment. Because I do know that the governor's got some money set aside for that, but it seems like if we can rethink the application of the dollars, if they're there, if we have people right now that can get into a place, but they don't have the down payment,
And there are organizations out there that offer some limited funding, but that funding is very limited and there's a lot more need than there is funding. Additionally, there's some other challenges that go beyond funding as we look at people who have been experiencing houselessness. Many times they may have something that's precluding them from getting into an apartment, whether that be a bad credit history, or maybe they have some old criminal records that might preclude them from getting housed. So, money is a challenge, but it is not the sole challenge in getting people housed. There's a number of additional challenges that go with that.
Do you have enough navigators?
We could always use more navigators.
We have 0.5 right now, to my knowledge, in East County, in the areas that we're asking help for.
Yeah, there's been some turnover on the East County navigation team. So I know we have one good contact that's coming out as much as they can. That's kind of what we have right now.
How does that impact your work?
I mean, like the captain said, the more resources we have, the better. The more partners we have, the better. If there's 10 of us, we make a lot more contacts. If there's 2 of us, there's a lot less contacts. The more bodies, the better.
And I can add in, sir, that, that is really our direct contact to resources and services. And so when that is limited, that limits our ability to connect people with those services. Also, when we have a full team of navigators, we have people who can assist us with making sure individuals get to appointments, making sure individuals get to the places they need to be, whether that be to, connect with housing or connect with a job, things like that. That's a heavy lift when we don't have those navigators and we're reliant on just 2 deputies and a sergeant to do that work.
Without question.
Is that like specific to East County that we're having one, we only have one?
Yeah, so the city of Portland, the joint office has provided the city of Portland with navigation teams, which theoretically a navigation team should be a multidisciplinary team that can offer wraparound services when they go out to a campsite. They've had them in the city of Portland for a number of years. It was only through the work of the city managers in East County that I think that the joint office provided us with a navigation team. And it is challenging to keep those positions filled. And there's, as the sergeant said, there's a lot of turnover in those. And just like a lot of our workforces, it's challenging to find people to fill those jobs.
Other questions from council?
What would a full navigation team consist of? You're talking, well, because I mean, from what you're mentioning, wraparound services and things like that. So one individual, for me, I mean,
All of East County?
I mean, yeah, I mean,
Right.
especially if you're going to a campsite, what I'm counting, 5 of you guys on your guys' team, or 4, and then plus 1. And obviously not everybody's on the same shift because you guys can't work 24 hours. So, what would a fully functioning navigation team look like?
Well, if I had a magic wand and I could just make what I wanted appear, I would like to see that we have a mental health professional, somebody's a professional in dealing with addiction, and somebody who has some expertise in finding alternative housing for people, along with our Hope Team deputies and sergeant.
So at least like a 4 to 5 person team.
Absolutely. I think that, one of the challenges we find is that when we set an appointment up for somebody, the majority of available resources are in downtown Portland. Folks can live out here because they don't want to be in downtown Portland. Many of our houseless community members out here were at one time housed in the same communities that they are now houseless in, whether they went to school out here or lived with family out here or worked out here. And just like anybody else, they stay here because they like the communities they live in, and those are the communities they're comfortable and familiar with. So it is a challenge to get somebody to go from their campsite down to downtown Portland and leave all their belongings behind, which could potentially be stolen or vandalized while they're gone. Also, on average, for somebody to get, as an example, a mental health appointment takes about 4 months. So asking somebody who is suffering from some mental health challenges, as well as trying to decide where they might get their next meal or where they might sleep out of the rain at night, to remember to be at an appointment in 4 months is almost unconscionable on our part. So our goal has always been to, instead of sending people to services elsewhere, bring services to people at their campsite, because I think that's when we have our greatest impact, when we can start dealing with people's challenges right there at their homes or where they're living.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
I believe it was about 2011 when we had a retreat that we were talking about our problem with homelessness, and mainly it was what is affecting us as far as our crossover between Walmart and here, where people were standing out with their signs and stuff. And we were trying to work at that time with Multnomah County on what could we do. And in that retreat, we really came up with quite an idea, and that was to approach the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department on what could we do in a positive way to help our homeless. And we were at the forefront, just so you know. And so the Sheriff's Department, when we talked to them about it, were like, wow. And with them having the foots on the ground and everything, they came to us with a program, and they named it the Hope Program. And, working with us. And I think it was Bill at the time. And I think you were there, Becky. I believe you were there as well. And wow, this thing really took off. And the first thing we were hitting on, because it was the easiest to get through, which we've never mentioned yet today, was the veterans program and what we could do to help them, because you could speedball them through the hospital situation and get them help right out and get them through, speaking as a veteran, okay, and get them help right away. And it would be a really good program for them. And then you could also learn from the federal government and what do they do and how could we mirror that for the other homeless people in helping them and create these programs to get them up and rolling. And so over all of these years have gone by, I see these disconnects coming up and back and forth. It's kind of like an engine that is pumping, and people come and people go, and for whatever reason, I just see these disconnects, right? And they're happening right now because of attrition. You got all of these diseases going around and closing down and whatever else. And then I see it personally because I'm helping my people myself, and then I lose them because their stuff is stolen, cut up, or whatever else because of situational things that happen to them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how these horrible things are happening to people. So I know that you're dealing with these things, on 100 times basis than what I'm dealing with. So I go back to, we need to pull out those slides that we had from like about 2012 and revamp those and put those connects back together again, of where it goes when you have a person in this situation, what do you do with them? And go down back through it. If you lose that connect, you need to figure out how to get it back into the system again and find those disconnects and put them back in again. Because that's what I'm hearing tonight, is that's what we're missing is those connections. And we got to keep those vitalized with phone numbers, emails, everything else, because we've got that. You guys are doing great. You guys are doing great on getting that in there. But then what happens is that you lose on where it is that you're supposed to go, because where are you supposed to go? Everybody's fluid and people are changing and moving on and moving up and what have you. So it's a wonderful program. We just gotta keep a hold of it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I want to make sure that there are any other questions from council. I do have one more question, but I don't want to monopolize the questioning here. This is a question regarding the RV example, and it's one that we're facing as are most communities. When you're contacting, and I'll use an RV, or let's make it a car, And there is an option. There is a place for them to go. But they say, no, I don't really want to go there for this reason, that reason, this other reason. When is it that the point comes that you can, and I believe should be able to say, that is your option now. It may not be what you prefer, but at this point in time, because your car is parked and it's causing a problem for the neighborhood or where your tent might be. But when is the point that we say, for now, we have a place for you that's safe? And from then, there could be further help. So I've struggled with that a little bit right now. I think this entire council, as you can hear, very compassionate, and we've been working hard in this city to help the houseless. But when is the point that they can't move their car 20 feet and say, I moved? You know, because you're facing it and I know you deal with it. So
Sure.
I just want a perspective on that, not necessarily a affirmative answer, but
Sure, and I can give you somewhat of an answer. I can tell you that it's different for every single
Absolutely.
case. And that, that's one of the things that the Hope team takes into account is what are the barriers to getting this vehicle moved? So it's different in every single case, but I agree with you. There is a point at which somebody is truly service resistant, where they have said, I know you've offered me all these things and there is nothing I'm interested in. I'm only interested in sitting right here, which is honestly a very rare occurrence. I think in my several years on the Hope team, I've seen maybe 2 or 3 occurrences where somebody was just dead set on they weren't moving no matter what we offered them. And yes, in that case, we will begin the process of posting that RV as a campsite. We will also post it for tow, and we'll go through that process and hopefully get a positive resolution from that.
sure. Because I think at some point there does need to be an end line, and then people will make choices.
Certainly, and I would share with you that, one of the tenets of the Hope team is accessibility with accountability. So we want to make things accessible to people because oftentimes they don't even know what's out there and available to them. But we do expect them to be accountable when it comes to making it to the appointments that we set up for them and taking those steps forward to make a change in their life, whatever that looks like for them, and also accountable to laws and being good community members in the communities that they live in. And if it would please the council, I'd like to share a couple pieces of good news that we have coming up. Number one, the sheriff's office applied for a grant and we were awarded a grant for a mental health professional. So we've started the hiring process for that. So that mental health professional will be assigned to the Hope team. So they'll be working with the Hope team. So we'll be one step closer to bringing that wraparound service to the campsite. Additionally, I had the opportunity to talk with the joint office about the phase 2 of their House Multnomah Now initiative when we looked at where the next place for that is. And I was able to make a convincing pitch, and the next phase of that will start in the Sandy River Delta. So we'll start working on rapid housing individuals that are living in the Sandy River Delta. Sandy River Delta is currently the one place in Multnomah County that has the largest single concentration of people experiencing houselessness. So that'll be a good step. And honestly, every opportunity and every time that we're able to successfully get somebody housed, somebody else buys in a little bit because they see that it really can happen. And if it can happen for this individual, that it can happen for them. So that's kind of, as we get people housed, that's the gift that just keeps giving, because we get other people who are interested and start taking the steps towards housing.
And if there's no other questions.
I have one. I guess it's just coming to, questions I get asked by the community. And I think one of your slides, it was a uncontained or contained campsite. when do those become like an unsafe area, especially when it's in a place close to a school or where kids are around? So kind of what is your guys' approach to something of that nature?
So some of the exceptions to like a 72-hour post on a camp is a public safety. But we have to be able to articulate what the public safety concern is, and it has to be reasonable. Obviously, if, let's just say hypothetically, someone was camped on school grounds, that could potentially be a public safety issue. If there's open needles all over the camp, potentially like sharp objects that a kid could find. It's going to be just an individual kind of assessment at each camp.
And we do absolutely look at things like if a camp has, maybe there's extreme criminal behavior. So outside of just the fact that they're houseless. So, if they're, dealing narcotics or they're committing burglaries or robberies, that obviously we address those much different than individuals who are doing nothing more than just having a place to lay their head at night. So as the sergeant mentioned, that's one of the kind of exceptions to the posting rule that we take into account. The other is extreme environmental damage. So if there is there's massive environmental damage going on, we can articulate a reason to post that camp and have that person move more quickly than the 72 hours. And then, of course, if it's a safety hazard for either the individual or the surrounding community, that's also another exception to that 72-hour posting rule. So we do look at those things and we evaluate each one of those things on an individual basis and for that individual camper and see where they kind of fit into those categories.
No, that's great. Because again, it was speaking with community members, it's being able to mention that, there's got to, kind of like everything, there's got to be a reason behind it, not because of your stigmatism of houseless folks. Is that a danger? It's like, what, did you see a threat, or are they doing something that is unlawful? And so them having a process also of documentation and obviously keep the individual's privacy, so not taking pictures directly of them, but of the surrounding area and how is it impacting the community and that individual that's living.
And that is one of the ways we work is we look at everything on an individual basis, not based on a geographic location. So even if there may be 3 or 4 people camped in a particular location, that doesn't mean that all 3 or 4 people may meet specific categories for posting. So we look at each individual camper and each individual campsite based on its own merit. And we make decisions based on individuals, not on entire locations. And that's why you don't see the sheriff's office participating in what is commonly called sweeps. We don't do those because those are based on geographic locations and don't take individual aspects of any location into account.
Well, thank you very much. In respect for our agenda and our other presenters, I do want to extend our thanks collectively here for the work you're doing and certainly for sharing some time with us tonight. And I would say that if there's a point later in the year when we would like to hear from the Hope team again, we would certainly appreciate that if you could come back and give us an update on, this is it's one person at a time.
Absolutely.
And it's long work and it's hard work, but thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, sir. And I would, before I go, I'd just like to thank the council and the city of Wood Village for their tremendous support of the Hope team. The Hope team doesn't continue to do the work it does without our community's support. So I appreciate that. And thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you.
And if I could take just 2 more minutes just to recap a few things. Again, we know we have other presenters. We heard, navigators are a huge needed resource. And we heard, there's attrition, hiring. Part of that's because the county, it's not a criticism of the county and the joint office. They hire nonprofits to do that work, and there's reimbursement contracts with that, which keeps the wages difficult to fill. So we've been advocating, if this truly is an emergency that we all believe it is, the county should be directly hiring at least some leads to make sure that we're getting basic services out there. And so we advocate for that. In terms of, people living in cars and RVs and hearing they're more than willing to go to a place, we have no places to go. A park opened up Northeast Portland about 6 months ago. It's finally now full. There were some barriers to that, including the vehicle needed to be registered, insured, et cetera. That's a barrier. So we've been advocating for a place, an RV park. Not to say low barrier, there needs to be community standards, some livability components. It could also be on a spectrum of, on-site utilities versus, just kind of parking there with maybe portable restrooms, showers, laundry, those kind of facilities. So we've been advocating for a year and a half, 2 years for something like that. In addition, we're just advocating for a place to store RVs or vehicles. So if, we can get, hey, there's a home for you and there's hesitancy about giving up what's known, we'll store that for 6 months, no charge, to let you know this is working out and that safety net. So we're advocating on those fronts. It's a challenge, the county's sitting on a lot of money. There's a lot of responsibility that goes with that. We meet monthly, the 4 city managers, Hope team, people from the joint office monthly to discuss the needs. And it's been frustrating that we're not making, progress like we'd like to see it in the timeliness. We're also very hopeful that this Housing Multnomah Now initiative hopefully can expand a little bit beyond, 1,000 acres and hit some of our more chronically unhoused in this region too, and get them linked up with a place they can call home and feel comfortable. So those are just on a quick thing that we're doing, and to the point of, if you're homeless, trying to navigate how to get services and the importance of navigators. Part of my presentation was going to go, just Google, I'm homeless in Portland, and navigate trying to find resources. One, there's not much in East County, including beds or shelter spaces. Two, example is if I want an ID card, I go to the 211, not a critique of 211. This is just how it operates versus how a navigator can operate. It will direct me to DMV in Salem versus we know navigators have more for local access, within days can get someone an ID card. If I want a cell phone, it takes me to a PO box in Portland, and we know navigators know how to get someone a cell phone same day or next day. That's the difference. And that's why the navigators are so critical to this work.
Just last 2 comments. As the cold weather comes, if community members are looking to kind of help or donate, is there a place we can donate, or what would best fit your guys' need in approaching, the colder weather now?
Yeah, they can reach out to us at our email address, and it's going to be things like sweatshirts, jackets, real quality gloves, good quality beanies, things like that. Yeah, hand warmers. Yeah, some of those things we're able to get from the joint office, but real actual winter clothing is hard to come by.
And I could also add that we work closely with all the local churches in our contract cities. So almost all of those churches have our contact information, will reach out to us if they get warm weather gear in the winter. So that's also another option, whether it be your churches here in your community or in Fairview or Troutdale. We've made connections with all those resources.
And I guess this last comment is maybe not so much towards the Hope team, but kind of looking at disposals of like RVs and vehicles. Has there been conversation with Metro on funding, maybe some of these initiatives or reducing the cost of them?
There's been some conversation about funding for disposal. Because they're actually a vehicle, there's certain laws, and I'm sure the Hope team can talk more about the laws, but I don't think we need to, about, registered vehicles and that disposition versus, stuff that may fall out of the vehicle and disposing of stuff that may be in an RV or vehicle before it's disposed of. But yeah, the cost it's expensive. And frankly, I'd rather tow an RV to an RV park where the person can start on a path to better success than tow it to a scrapyard where the person's starting all over again. And one more piece about towing, they may be living in their car with their belongings and it may not be registered in their name. So if they go to the tow yard to get their stuff, they can't because, their ID doesn't match with the car. So again, the care and compassion, trying to balance in community livability and accountability. It's a very tightrope that the Hope team does exceptionally well. And I do appreciate the broader Wood Village community and surrounding cities. We're working together to try to do what we can, understanding that the county and the joint office hold the bulk of the resource. And it is frustrating seeing that they're giving back money from the state, giving back money from the federal government because they can't spend the resource. And we know there's a need. And so we're all just about kicking and screaming just to start doing some things. It may not be perfect and it will be better than what we have today.
I want to suggest that we hold the rest of the comments for this evening. But what I'd like to do is, Greg, I think we need to do just maybe every 2 months or so, do an update, because I know what you're doing. I know the kinds of contacts I'm having with some commissioners on this, and there is a lot of work trying to be done. And I think we should be doing some regular updates on homelessness here at the city council. So again, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item. Update on the flood safety, correct, Greg?
Yeah.
And with us here tonight is our Executive Director of the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District, as well as the other 6 districts that comprise the flood safety spectrum in Multnomah County, Jim Middaugh, and he's going to give us a presentation on what's been happening, what the history is, what's been happening, what's coming up in the future. So with that,
Welcome, Mr. Middaugh.
Well, thank you for having us, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. For the record, I am Jim Middaugh, and I am the Executive Director of the Multnomah County Drainage District and the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District. Quite a mouthful. Before I start tonight, I do really want to give a shout out to Seth and Greg. They've been really helpful, and they put a lot of time in to the effort to upgrade and improve our flood safety system. They ask tough questions, but they also offer really great advice. And they not only show up at meetings, but they give me extra time on the phone and over lunch. And John did that before Seth. And I also want to recognize Eric Mueller in the back, who's the member of our board from Fairview and also a very helpful person. So thanks, Greg. Thanks, Seth. Thanks, John. Eric.
Sometimes I feel like more of a fly in the ointment, but you're welcome.
The right reasons, right? And so these folks are representing you and your community well on our board. So I appreciate it, even when occasionally it creates more work for me. That's the job, and they're doing it well. So thank you. I am here tonight to talk, hopefully briefly, about flood safely. I have about 10 minutes of presentation for you. For those of you who don't know, there is a flood safety system along the Columbia River, essentially from the Willamette to the Sandy River. It's about 27 miles of earthen levees and 16 pump stations that move water that falls inside the levees over the levees because it can't get out anymore. And it's a pretty important system that a lot of people don't know much about. We like to say it's hidden in plain sight, but it protects a lot of really important things. About 8,000 people live on the floodplain. About 50% of our manufacturing and warehouse jobs in the entire greater Portland region are on the floodplain. Our system protects the second largest source of drinking water and water for industry in the state of Oregon. And 22 million passengers fly in and out of PDX, not to mention all of the freight that is transported through that facility. And that's hard to do when it's flooded. And all told, there's about $16 billion in economic activity that comes off that floodplain every year. It's a pretty important spot. So why do we have to talk about it? You guys have a lot of important issues, just homelessness being one of them. And we get great support from the Hope team around our facilities too. So they are really awesome people. Well, we're here to talk about it because candidly, in the wake of Katrina, does everybody remember Katrina? FEMA and the Corps of Engineers got is the standards for federally certified flood safety systems. So our system is at risk of falling out of certification and accreditation without some capital investments. And so let me talk a little bit more about what we're doing here. First of all, our system was constructed originally in 1917. So it's well over 100 years old. And many of the components of the system are original. Some of the components that are newer are ending their useful life, like our pumps. And like any good set of boards would do, particularly when they're elected by landowners, they've done an excellent job keeping costs down. And as a result, our system needs investment. We're running on fumes in many cases. So that's one reason we need to act. The second reason that I would like to share with you is we have actual risk of flooding. We're seeing a huge increase in the amount of extreme weather events, and we can argue all night about what the cause of those things is. But from my standpoint, the most recent events in California originally were forecast for Oregon. So it's really a question of when, not if, we're going to get one of those atmospheric rivers. And we're seeing rainfall levels that are literally historic. So we're set up to handle 2.5, maybe 3 inches of rain in 24 hours if it's been dry. We're seeing 15, 20, 25 inches in a day falling on the West Coast. So we need to make some upgrades. And you have a fact sheet, I believe, that has all the projects that we're thinking about. We can talk more about that in a minute. So it's raining a lot. We're seeing greater rain on snow events. We've seen levee failures in Sacramento, in Santa Cruz, in Vancouver, British Columbia. So pretty nearby. We also run the risk of losing some really key federal partnership programs. And I'm going to just highlight 3 of them tonight. The first is we are one of 6 projects that was authorized in a bipartisan fashion by the current Congress, which is sort of hard to imagine, last year for federal investment. So we are now authorized, one of 6 projects nationally, to receive more than $100 million in federal investment. We need to retain that federal accreditation and certification. We won't get those funds if we can't provide a 1/3 local match. So we need to find a way to do that. The other federal partnership with the Corps of Engineers that a lot of people don't know about is because the Corps comes in and inspects our levees on an annual basis, and so far we've been able to maintain it to their standards. If there's a natural disaster and our system is damaged, the Corps will repair that for us for free. It's a huge insurance policy for us. It's called the Rehabilitation and Inspection Program, RIP. Not a great acronym, but we really like having it. And it's good to know that if there were some huge damage that the feds would have our back. But if we don't maintain those standards and pass those inspections, they won't do that for us. And then the third partnership that I want to highlight for you involves the Federal Emergency Management Agency and their flood insurance program. There is a federally subsidized flood insurance program that people are eligible for if they live behind accredited flood safety systems. We are currently at risk of losing accreditation, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And so that would have some pretty significant consequences, particularly on accessible flood insurance. Without those subsidies, we see huge increases in flood insurance costs, and we see changes in requirements to hold flood insurance if you have a business or a property on the floodplain. And the last thing that happens if we lose accreditation, and we saw this up in Milton Freewater, and there's some really interesting news stories. So if you want to learn about it, you can Google Milton Freewater and FEMA, and you'll probably find it. Or if you're interested, I can send some. But if we lose accreditation, FEMA will remap the floodplain as a higher flood risk. And what that would do would require a rezoning of many of the existing functions on the floodplain, would also require new building codes that would, for example, potentially mandate that the first floor of new buildings or restored or improved buildings would be 10 feet higher than they are today to avoid flood risk. So the disruption on the floodplain would be very significant and very costly. And if we go back to the type of manufacturing and warehouse facilities and other things that the floodplain supports, it would really be devastating for our economy if we don't make those investments. So what's our plan? Let's get to the bottom line. We got to raise some money. And I hear a lot as I go around the region that somebody else should pay for this. And I wish that were true. I keep buying an occasional Powerball ticket, usually only, but I haven't won yet. But if I do, I'm going to make some investments in our flood safety system. But in light of the fact that I haven't been very lucky with Powerball, we do need a plan. And so what is that plan? As I said, there are 4 legacy drainage districts that have been around for over 100 years. In the current fiscal year, we're spending 15 million or so in operations. There's some capital dollars that I don't want to include. We've been working with Seth and Eric and our board to identify a realistic forecast for year one of this new district that we're trying to set up. And we estimate costs to be in the neighborhood of 16.7 million. So that is an increase over today. So costs are going up. I want to be really clear about that. The major components of those cost increases are inflation. And they are including now for the first time capital for operations and contingency funds. We don't have those currently because, again, the boards have made good decisions to keep rates low. As a result, we don't have operating capital when something breaks, and we don't have any contingency funds. There are also some new obligations that the legislature put on this new district, and we do need to fund some of those. We have allocated approximately $500,000 for those new mandates, and we can talk about those if you'd like. And there are a few service gaps. We don't have IT. We don't have some other things that are pretty critical. So that makes up the difference from today to that 16.7. And I'm happy to go into more detail if you'd like to know why our costs are going up. And we are searching for ways to prepare a year one budget that would begin July 1st. That's less than 16.7 million. And I'm optimistic we're going to be successful doing that. So how are we going to raise $16.7 million? Today on the floodplain, we use property assessments. And we're estimating that in year one, those assessments, we're asking for permission to continue to use those on the floodplain. We have to go to the legislature to get that permission. But we estimate that those assessments will generate in year one about $9.5 million. And that's the entire floodplain. And then we're also working with Seth and our board and cities across the region to create a new flood safety benefit tax. That tax would be allocated by the district to the cities and unincorporated Multnomah County by population. We need to raise about $6.2 million in that new tax. And I want to remind you that we have a new district for the new agency, and that district is all of Multnomah County inside the UGB. So the number of people who are going to be helping with these costs has increased, which is useful. It's also challenging because we have people on the west side of Multnomah County who are going to be asked to support our operations for flood safety on the Columbia River. But recall, everybody in the region benefits from a dry floodplain. So that's our pitch. And then the last tranche of our funding is services. We do development reviews, and we actually have maintenance agreements for other people's pump stations that we take care of for money. And what's new for year one of the urban district is we've also reached agreements with the Port of Portland, with Metro, and with the City of Portland to create new service agreements with the new district to offset losses created by compression using property assessments on the floodplain. So we're going to get about $1 million from the compression impacts on the port, on Metro, and on City of Portland properties. That reduces the overall impact of compression on the floodplain by close to 65%. And they are happy to enter into those agreements with us because they want us to have adequate resources to protect the lands that they own. So we're excited that they've been willing to step up and help us with that issue. So if you add those three things together, you get 16.7 million. So that's our plan for the operating revenue. To cut to the chase, you guys are going to be newly asked to contribute. And we appreciate your entertaining this request. And again, your board members have done an excellent job trying to keep that as low as possible. So in year one, the share of our total operations costs that Wood Village would bear is about 0.2%, which reflects the population of Wood Village. So it's an appropriate and we believe an equitable way to share those costs. And I want to share a little bit about what other people will pay. And so I'm not going to dwell on this, and I'll show you some other things and dig into where the west side and east side kind of get in their share of contribution compared today with the future. But you can see just briefly on your slide the numbers that get us to that full amount of the new flood safety benefit tax. When we look at the total operational revenue, so this is a combination of the floodplain that you guys aren't responsible for and this new tax, we see that properties in Portland in our current fiscal year, the one we're in now, pay about 81.2%. In the staff's proposal, that number goes up to 81.5. Not a huge increase, but it's going up, not down. And we know that's important for East County. We also have looked at what properties in East County would pay. So that's Gresham, Fairview, Wood Village, and Troutdale. And in the current year, those cities are contributing, or the properties in those cities more accurately, are contributing about 18.8% in our current fiscal year. And that will drop to 18% in year one. Again, it's a bigger number. I don't want to mislead you about that. So I want to be really clear, the number's going up. And when we look at the port, I often hear from East County and candidly, Western Multnomah County about the port. People know the port benefits from our system and people want the port to pay their share. And what we see is their share is going up as well in the future. And they've been great partners and are willing to fund this increase because they value our system. And here's some pies just to show you the current year on the left. In year one, because our district has expanded, we now have access, we hope, with your permission and support, to the residents of Wood Village and unincorporated Multnomah County, Lake Oswego, and Maywood Park. And you can see the various percentage contributions that folks will make. So again, Portland's gone up a little bit and many of the East County cities have seen theirs gone down. Of course, we don't have a comparator for you because we're asking you for the first time to contribute. And that's operations. So that takes care of what we have. Now, to get back to getting to those federal standards and protecting the things we need to protect, we also need some capital. And so we're working with our board right now to seek their approval to refer a general obligation bond to the voters of the district, which again is Multnomah County inside the urban growth boundary, for the May 24 election. We don't have that approval from the board yet, and we hope to ask for that approval in December. That general obligation bond, you have a fact sheet and I think a description of the various projects in front of you. And I'm not that detailed expert, our engineers are on the projects, but I can answer your questions. But just to highlight, and the information you have also has a broader range, and staff is finalizing its recommendations, but I'm going to say, I think for the first time on the record, that I will not support a recommendation from staff that's higher than 175 million. I think that's adequate. And so we had a broader range. We haven't gone to our board, so I don't know where they'll land, but I'm hoping they'll listen to my advice and go there. That provides that federal cost share and leverages about 100 to 110 million in federal money. It funds some accreditation projects to address FEMA, and those are things the Corps can't pay for because they're our responsibility. The Corps won't pay for our lack of operations and maintenance. It also helps us bring some multi-objective design to flood safety. So those are things, for example, to think about the future of climate change, energy efficiency, multi-speed pumps. It also means trying to find more ways to let water stay on land longer because it reduces the peak capacity needs of our pumping systems. And so that might be things like the Troutdale Reynolds Industrial Project wetland we put a weir on the end of that. And that weir during heavy rains has saved our bacon because our pumps aren't big enough to move all the water coming off all that new impervious in the trip. And that trip is so valuable. So it's been terrific to be able to close that weir and keep everybody dry. The bond will also pay for upgraded operations facilities. Our facilities are not seismically sound. They will not be functional in the event of a flood. So we hope to improve our shop and our operations facility. We do intend to appoint an independent oversight committee to look at this bond and to hold the staff and the board accountable for spending consistent with the promises we're making and developing in the materials you have before you. We forecast a conservative, which means higher than likely cost at 175 million of 14 cents per thousand of assessed value on property in the district. And for a median home in the district, that equates to about $30 a year. We did a round of polling about 18 months ago, and we just completed a second round of polling and focus groups. And what we find is that we start off at about 61% yes. A significant portion of that support is soft. When we go through an even short number of arguments, we see the support harden considerably, but more than double. And we also see a final yes of 66%. We know that if we have active opposition, that will be a challenging campaign. We're meeting with the Portland Metro Chamber, we're meeting with East County Chamber, we're meeting with all the delegations from the cities, and we hope to have some support for that. So that's the capital side. We expect to be able to complete construction of all the required projects in approximately 10 years, a couple years after the bond is issued. And we are currently planning a flat payment rate to pay those bonds off in 20 years. In closing, our safety and the economy and a significant federal investment are at risk if we don't act. I want to highlight that while costs are going up by about $1.5 million for operations, there are critical investments in inflation and contingency and operating capital. And overall, the East County share of our operating costs goes down under the staff's recommended proposal. Again, just really want to dangle that $100 million in federal investment out there because it'd be here. And we have tried to pursue some other options to fund this thing. And particularly on the operation side, we've really worked hard to come up with a utility fee or a service fee or other tools that would avoid the compression on the floodplain. And what we found is that at least in the next couple of years, none of those options are workable. There's financial, political, legal, and technical challenges with upgrading all 7 cities' stormwater billing systems to incorporate a flood safety benefit. And we also know that some of the proposals that have been floated outside of this are tax on employees, or a fee for employees, a fee for residential use, a registration fee, and other things really face significant political opposition. And we need to get progress in the short session of the legislature to be successful. So Wood Village has been at the table for almost a decade trying to fix this thing. And you're still at the table. We really appreciate it. And now more than ever, we really need your continued support. I don't take lightly that we're asking for money. I know there's a lot of priorities in the region and in this city. Then people are hurting. And we hope that the combined package and the federal investment makes it worth it. And I don't like trite metaphors or phrases, but I think we really are in one of those situations where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure here. And we need to fix our roof before it starts raining. And so with that, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the help from your team and would be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
So how long do we have until the money runs out from the federal government on being able to meet that dollar criteria?
The federal money runs out. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
well,
How long does the authorization last?
yes.
They can put it on hold, but what happens is the Corps kind of drops you to the bottom of the list. And so if you're not a good local sponsor, the Corps doesn't advocate for you with Congress. And so we are very lucky in that Congress appropriated $3 million initially after storms that happened after Katrina. We were able to get $3 million to do an assessment of our system. We completed that ahead of schedule under budget. And the last piece that I think gives me confidence is that the State Department is currently negotiating a new treaty with Canada on flows in the Columbia River. And we are at the very bottom of a very, very big river system, and we are the largest urban area on that river system. So the State Department has a real interest in having a strong negotiating position with Canada. So federal investments in protecting our region from flooding are really critical to the State Department's negotiation strategy. So we're confident, but it's Congress. So if there's a lot of local dispute or opposition, it hurts our ability to move forward. It's not a guarantee if we take another year or two that we would lose that authorization, but it definitely increases costs in the long run, time value of money and inflation, and would probably stop some of the design work that we're currently engaged in because federal appropriations have started to flow.
More questions? Go ahead.
I've got one more. Are you going to be looking at, or how are you going to be getting this word out to the public so that they would vote positively in this?
Yeah, we are starting to begin conversations about establishing a private campaign effort. And I can say that here because nothing's been referred. I think one of the reasons I've been hired is I have a long track record of working on these sorts of measures here in the Portland region and have worked on a lot of successful ones. So I am hopeful that with a small amount of money and the right endorsements, this is one of those bond measures where honestly, the newspaper endorsements and some ballot pamphlet statements are likely to carry the day. We won't have a big expensive campaign because we won't have those resources, but I hope to take a little time off and put my shoulder to the wheel and raise a little money and have started doing some work on my own time to make some effort there. We do have resources set aside for some publicly funded mailings to the new district, and we will be working with the Secretary of State's office to make sure those are compliant with all election laws and don't advocate one way or the other, but share things appropriately. And then we do have a team that we've hired and along with our staff where we were out all summer at various events, and we intend to do some social media and some news media work to try and highlight the opportunities and risks and actual costs that we're asking the voters to bear.
And I believe you guys came to our city night out and had a booth or summer.
You say that there's active resistance, like when you explain this, I'm like, why wouldn't we want to up the floodplain, you know, like who might be, besides maybe people not wanting to increase funds, but who might be actively resisting?
Well, I'll just give you an example. I had the opportunity to meet with Mayor Wheeler's chief of staff, and Mayor City of Portland has taken a position that there should be no new fee or tax increases for 2 years. Now, when I asked specifically about how targeted and proactive he would be with that effort, I got the impression that he's not going to be particularly proactive or targeted in that effort. Similarly, we've heard from the Portland Metro Chamber, from their staff director, that he believes that the Portland Metro Chamber should take a no new tax position right now. So we're working with their government relations committee, and we'll be presenting there on November 9th. We hope to avoid opposition from the major business coalition in Greater Portland. We have support from many financial institutions who don't want escrow for flood insurance. We have support from local manufacturers. We have some support from a local brewery, Level Brewing, and we're working with Alaska Airlines and Portland General and a number of others who have critical facilities on the floodplain. But I also understand that taxes are really high in Multnomah County, and it's a real problem. So we're trying to be reasonable and tell our story. And if the region doesn't want to go forward, we'll keep working at it until we can find a path that works for people. We are confident that with the right endorsements and some support from our board. And I think the other place where I see some opposition, and I want to be candid, it's coming from our board member from Troutdale, who has a very principled and thoughtful position about compression and would really prefer us to find a fundraising method that doesn't exacerbate that problem. And that's why we've been so successful, I think, with the port and Metro and the city at making an additional contribution on the public land compression. I can't, unfortunately, despite all my power as a special district executive director, I can't change Oregon's constitution and fix the property tax problem that we have here. I wish I could.
That's disappointing, Jim.
I know.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Take a second job.
Yeah.
It certainly seems like the Port of Portland, it would be a major player in supporting this. And you've already said they support it for the, I mean, obviously they have to be protected.
Yeah, they've been terrific partners.
Yeah. Seth, anything you would want to share with the council?
Sure. I'll just have a couple of comments. I think Jim's right on point in saying that this is an ounce of prevention or is much cheaper than a pound of cure on this. If you look at your bond, the packet that was passed out with the projects that they're looking at, the majority of this is either projects that are required for by the Corps or FEMA. And those that aren't required by the Corps or FEMA, most of those are actual hard infrastructure of pump station replacement and infrastructure. It's things that make sense to do. There's no point in modernizing half of the system and having pumps that continually fail. Greg and I have been working with Jim and his staff over the last year to talk about operating costs and how to keep those reasonable, because that's always a concern that we know that you have for our operations, is to really take a hard look at what we're adding and seeing if it's necessary and brings value. And so I went ahead and supported the $16.7 million year one budget as one that seemed appropriate. And again, Jim mentioned that there's some funding built in there for ongoing capital maintenance so that we don't end up always having to rely on bonds or the largesse of our congressional delegation to fund needed capital improvements. So, and also just kind of stress, when the bond package gets presented to the board and there's an approval, anything that I'll probably come back and give you guys an update, and you guys have the option at that point of taking a position on supporting it through a resolution or remaining neutral, or you guys can also oppose that as well. The hope would be that you'd have enough confidence to be able to do an endorsement or a support, even if though the district might not be perfect, it's needed and better than what the system we currently have. I sometimes get on a soapbox and kvetch, but the reality is Jim and his staff are currently staffing 7 publicly elected boards and are operating those. And this consolidation gets rid of all of those and forms one district. with one set of board meetings rather than 7, which is a much more efficient way of doing that. And the hope is that in the future, this will benefit everyone, even though it is going to require more ongoing payments and a lot of capital investment. So those are my comments.
We love our, but it's a lot of meetings.
It's a lot of meetings. Yeah.
I also want to share one. I think Seth isn't giving himself enough credit. The board gave me direction originally to come up with some options for operating revenues between 25 and $35 million. And we came in at 31. Heads exploded all over the region. But I think Seth was really instrumental in driving those costs down to what I think is a realistic level. And so I think he deserves a lot of credit. The other thing I want to make sure that you guys are aware is that the state of Oregon has contributed just over $10 million so far for the initial federal match. That's getting the design work going. So we want to thank the state of Oregon, and they have a levy grant fund that we were instrumental in getting established. That grant fund has some allocations to urban and rural areas. And then in the last 2 years, we've received all of the urban contribution, and we're working with the legislature to refill that. And Business Oregon has been, again, a terrific partner. So,
And
I guess my final, a clarifying question is, what is the ask for Wood Village residents? So is it that $30 a year average medium home size, or what is?
So with the operational levy, for to fund the operations, that's going to probably be done through a charge on the utility bills, whether we incorporate that into our existing stormwater charge as rates, or whether we separate that as a call out fee is something that once we are moving forward, that would come back to you guys in the spring as far as how that would look. And then we would collect the money through our utility bill and then pass that to the urban flood safety. And the year one projection is that's about $34,000 from Wood Village. So, when you think about, we have, 4,500 people, that ends up being about $90 a year, 90 per person. Did I do the math right on that? It might be $10 a year.
I think that's high.
Yeah, it's $10 a year. And then the other part is that $175 million would be collected by the county as a geo bond that's spread across all the property in Multnomah County. And so the average value home would end up paying $30 a year. So
that's, just to be clear, it's median, not
median.
Yeah.
So you can expect somewhere between $40 and $50 a year is what this would end up costing a typical Wood Village resident. Obviously, business calculation is a little bit different, but that's kind of the need that we would be collecting the operation part, and then the county would be collecting the capital funds.
And that's where I just want to add on to really quick, couple of points. First, I don't envy Jim in his position that he was in to try to spin this up. It's hard work, and I certainly didn't make it any easier. So I do appreciate it, because no one wants to pay. We see the need, we see the value. No one wants to pay. So, Jim's done a great job of striking a good balance between 7 different boards and different jurisdictions and trying to find, that balance between needs and wants for operating and as well as the bond. And that's where I think, this legislative tweak that's going to be needed for collection. I think we're hopeful, because my understanding is language hasn't been crafted yet. And I think we're hopeful that it has enough flexibility that, it satisfies, how Portland wants to collect it and how we can collect it, and our, some unique circumstances and our ability to collect some taxes. So, we're hopeful that it'll be crafted in a way that is amenable to the jurisdictions to collect how they want to. And then, we just kind of move forward with it. So I do want to thank Jim. Also, Seth and John have been on the board for a while doing the work, and hopefully we're at the final stretch here.
Yeah. One last element that the board has directed us to incorporate into legislative modifications is a cap on that new flood safety benefit tax. So it's going to be capped at CPI. Pick your favorite version of CPI. I'll accept it. I don't care. But again, our objective here is not to keep jacking rates up. It's to take care of the system and then make it really difficult to raise additional funds. We're a special district. We serve the FEMA map holders, which are the cities on the floodplain. Serve at their pleasure and your pleasure. And we take that very seriously. We don't want to be Metro. We don't want to be anything else. We want to take care of our system and operate it well. And in a perfect world, maybe one of these other cities or the county would take us over and you could save some additional administrative funds. But I've been unsuccessful in getting them to do that either. So.
Well, last question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So when it comes to the voters, are we having them vote on two separate like things, or it'd be one thing, is just the collection is kind of up to the city?
Hopefully, the collection methodology for operating is crafted in a way that meets, not only our needs, but other cities' needs. And that just happens. It would be essentially a legislative requirement. Then it gets to the bond, and that's where the voters would vote on the capital side of that.
Good
question.
questions. Well, I know Seth's been working hard on it because I get updates and so, yeah, good luck with this. And I don't quite mean it like that. What I mean is that you got a lot of work and I think you've done a tremendous job. We're just meeting you here tonight, but based on the briefings I've been getting, it's been a long haul.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of, some little tension here and there. But it does
I'll be a
seem
little
like.
more of that before we get to the end.
Yeah.
Just in
But
all. honesty.
I think if you can, for your own sake and for the sake of just the efficiency of it, one district instead of 7 districts
Yeah.
would probably be a great progress anyway.
I'm thinking it's going to be a big career capper to make a net reduction in
Yeah.
the number of government agencies. So I'm
Yes.
pretty excited.
So council on there's no action tonight, but if you look at your staff report there, there is a direction. And what staff is asking for is we give a consensus here to move forward with what we've heard here tonight. Everybody on board?
Yes.
Board.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Greg. And I expect you to continue to bust my chops when that's required.
Only hopefully for the next 8 months.
Interest in that, Seth.
Thanks.
Thank you. folks.
Thank you.
For
Thank
your
you.
public service. I know you have really hard jobs and I'm grateful to you for doing them.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Let's see here. Something easy. Director of Finance report.
Is it?
I thought it was public work.
Oh, yeah, Public Works. Good luck.
The city that cares. Yeah.
We gotta move along.
Yeah.
Mayor, city councilors,
Good evening.
here to present the
You need to take. a break.
October
You need-
2023 Public Works.
For my birthday.
Okay.
But,
Sorry, John. Let's have the Public Works report first. And then we'll have some cupcakes for Councilor
Okay.
Clark's birthday.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, councilors, council president. In your director's report packet, you had the Metro's fatality report. Again, that's a report requested by council that we receive through Amuktuk. And also the Amuktuk agenda was attached. If you have any questions on that, please feel free. But you can see the pictures here in the presentation. That's our infield at the ball field. So I don't think the infield's looked that good in the last 10 years.
Probably 20.
Yep. Yeah. So it looks good. And then our 9-hole disc golf course was installed. We're just finalizing some signs and we'll get those produced and installed hopefully here in the next couple of weeks.
Looks like it's getting ready for the World Series out there for that.
That's right.
I was like, where is that?
I don't know who it's either going to be, Philadelphia or,
Yeah, we're going to find out tonight.
I wanted to provide you an APP update from some of the projects, that's under Public Works. Gateway entry signs. Right now, we're working with RH2 to do a design for the North Gateway sign, which includes some urban renewal funding for that. And then once we get that, we'll follow through with a RFP for construction. So I'll keep you posted as that progresses. Sewer main trunk line, the CCTV camera work has been completed. RH2 is reviewing that information. And right now we're waiting for Keller Associates and RH2 to provide estimates for flow monitoring. So that's where we are with that. Parks, signs and lighting. Park signs, we've been throughout this fiscal so far, we've upgraded a lot of signs. And like I said, at the beginning of the presentation, the 9-hole disc golf course signs, hopefully will get installed here in the next couple of weeks. Lighting, that's something you will hear about here in the future. So in the November meeting, I'm going to provide a Parks Commission update. Met with Parks Commission last week. So more to come on that. Park restroom replacement, where we are with that is a design RFP opening next week. Wednesday, November 1st is kind of where that is.
And we expect actual proposals this time.
Yes. So again, we separated the construction and the design through talking with regional professionals. They said that was probably the best direction to go. So because we're running into, some funding. I think we talked about that, where we were with that. So hopefully next week we'll have some good news with the design RFP opening. Facility security. So Becky and the team has been doing a great job working with Verkada. And we're right now, so we got, the high level, what's the best of the best. And now we're looking, staff is looking at each facility going, what do we need? What do we want? What do we need? Looking upgrading locks, lighting, cameras. Does every facility need 24-hour cameras and monitoring? Probably not, but we're just looking at taking a dive into each facility there. SCADA, right now, Control Systems is anticipating end of November, I believe, for a completion on that. Running into some programming issues with the past integrator, what was installed there and what the upgrades are. We're probably looking at under a $50,000 change order there. So, and again, that's getting a fresh start with some additional programming. We are going to have some additional savings on the rate study. So Seth did a great job with that. So we could reallocate some of those funds, but we're looking at probably just under $50,000 for a change order. We don't know what the final change order is. We would rather wait, and then when the project is completed, come back with a change order rather than coming back 2 or 3 times asking for additional funds. So feel free to interrupt anytime to ask questions. So I'm going to move on. So the 238th medians. This was a sample section on the south median just north of Halsey. This is artificial turf. City Manager Dirks found a recycling place in Sheridan that does all the turf fields up and down the West Coast. This particular turf was from Washington State Stadium, but again, we do have allocations for. I forgot the sample. So. Allocations for center median maintenance. It's just nobody wants this. They want top dollar to maintain this, and we just don't have those kind of allocations. So we're looking at alternatives here and kind of a mix and match where we don't want to remove trees. So going to remove trees.
Nobody freak out.
Yeah. So, but some of the low hanging brush, so to speak, that doesn't even look good anyway.
Keep them healthy.
Yeah. So, and again, the aesthetic look, we want to improve that. And I mean, that is our gateway coming off I-84 right there into our city.
Yeah.
So
I can't orient to where this is. Sorry, this is looking north.
it's looking north from
usually
Halsey
driving.
to I-84.
Thank you.
North to the freeway.
Sorry,
Yeah.
looking north towards what? Sorry.
4.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And so in the next week or two, you'll see staff installing additional turf. We picked up about 3,200 square feet of turf today. So
Is that what they're doing at night?
no, so there's,
Because we have some suggestions.
yeah, so.
Those are our friends at ODOT. Surprised, including when they drilled into our brand new turf to put
Yes.
in footings for a sign that we're unaware of what even it is. So more to come on that.
Around. No. So they.
Yeah, ODOT is putting a new upgraded crosswalk at I-84
Sweet.
and the north median there. So
Yeah, redoing the full signal, it'll actually be 2 left turn lanes, not a left and a straight. So they're reorienting that entire on-ramp westbound 84. At least not the on-ramp, but the signal right there. That's what they're working on, plus then the crosswalk improvement.
So yeah, that's a sample of the turf going around there. As I mentioned, we did have a Parks Commission meeting last week. Some of the topics that we talked about was the multi-purpose field restoration, community development block grant project, the completed one, and the future project coming in 2024. What are some recommendations there? We talked about park signage. We talked about the disc golf course. We talked about the restroom replacement. We talked about staffing, upcoming CDBG project, which more to come on that. Like I said, in November, I'm going to give a recap. Parks Commission non-council term update. So staff will be sending out applications to the non-council members. And then we'll bring it back to city council for nomination, election nomination in December. And then we had some open discussions really from Parks Commission. The number one is safety, lighting. Again, as we look at moving forward, probably more to come. As I provide the wrap up in November, council will provide some feedback. But again, we have the council retreat coming up in sometime in February. So I'm sure you will be hearing more about some recommendations and future projects and future grant submittals.
It's already been a year since the retreat. Bananas.
And
at your next meeting, we're talking about the retreat. So
Questions for John? Comments? Thank you, John. I attended the Parks Commission meeting and John's doing a tremendous work with that committee. And it's nice to see the kind of progress that we're making with our park.
So I'm done. So you guys can have your cupcake.
Okay.
Important agenda item.
We're running, it's 8:00 right now. So let's get our cupcakes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And then we'll continue on. So happy birthday, Councillor Clark.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Yes.
I'll do the
Yeah.
chocolate one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's also hers. We share a birthday.
Councillor Clark,
My lucky or.
Happy
to have a
birthday.
granddaughter.
you're still in your 50s or you just come into the 60s?
Yeah, I wish. But I share my birthday with that.
Oh, well, then that's a heck of a lot better than this birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that too?
Is that a
Every
granddaughter?
morning and I'm,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's cute.
Yeah, she's.
Gotta-
All right.
Yeah.
It looks like a Twinkie down there. I don't eat cupcakes at this time of night.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because
I mean, if we're gonna party,
You got a party right.
I will take a cupcake home with me though.
Thank
I'm
you for
69.
Are you really?
Yeah.
You are not.
69, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't believe that?
I would
What you
joke.
thought?
Sorry, Seth, I should have just Xed out.
Yeah, I'm not just saying that.
She made it. I thought you were 78.
Can you believe he's turning 70?
79.
Hilarious.
Well, that's a
Wow,
challenge getting all
like,
these
wow.
guys out of there.
You gotta put your fingers.
I do. Look at my fingers.
20 years.
Okay, all right. All right. We will get our cupcakes and
Thank you, Greg.
let everybody go to
It's to celebrate.
Councilor Stan.
No, thank
That's,
you.
that's.
Yeah, the chocolate one is, I got it. All right. So, and there's a vanilla one coming down. So Seth, your challenge is to take us through this financial report and
Cupcake.
yeah. So,
That's torture. Who's watching us?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. Included in your packet was the staff report for September, which a big thanks to Becky for sending that out because I forgot about it.
Thanks, Becky.
Yes, doing the. We had our auditors here the week of the 13th, 12th, 13th. They were here all week and they wrapped up their final visit. So that's exciting. And then the next week I was at a government financiers conference down in Eugene. And so I did a couple presentations there. One on I provided color commentary on how to transition from having other people prepare your audit to doing it yourself. So that was a fun one. And then we did do an update on property, which was the second property tax meeting that I've gone to. I also got invited down to talk at the legislative days in front of the House Subcommittee on Economic Development and Small Businesses. So did a presentation there and again, continuing to advocate for incremental change, things that we can do with their statutory to improve the situation that we have with our property taxes. And so that'll probably be a topic for the retreat, just kind of what we want to continue to do, looking at the next long session. We're not planning on bringing anything forward in the short session because the short session doesn't offer a lot of opportunities for new ideas. So just as you got an update on flood safety, as another update, we had a meeting with public health policy advocate for the county commissioner's office. So the person who within her office is in charge of community health, which is also has oversight of the contract with AMR. And they're going to be putting together a roundtable. And so once they send over details, I'll forward it out to you guys to see if any of you want to participate. And the idea is to have a discussion with some of the East County partners on service levels, how to be involved in the AMR contract, and the issues that we brought up with the IGA, with the 911 agency there. So you'll be seeing that. Other than that, I didn't have any updates from the finance director's report, other than this is the first month we're including the capital report. So you'll see the capital spending so far. So most of the invoices we get in are for last year's work, and so they don't show up on there. So if it looks like we haven't done anything over the summer, that's not true. As John pointed out, the paving project's already done, but you won't see it on there until that we actually pay the invoice and the cash leaves the bank. So I'm happy to entertain any questions or follow up from the report or any of the comments.
Questions? Thank you, Seth. We're running, so just, we are a little bit beyond 8 o'clock. Does anybody have to leave for childcare or any other reasons? All right, then we'll move that forward.
Do this and
Go ahead. Yeah.
my main update, you have the APP in your packet. John did a great job updating on the big capital. So I won't touch on any of that unless you all have questions. My main thing, I want to update Main Streets on Halsey. At your next meeting, I'm going to go into a little more detail, kind of its history, where we're at, and some I'll call them concerns moving forward. It seems like our investment of time and resource is diminishing, turning direction that it seems to be going. So we want to bring that package forward to you. So you're in the loop of kind of where we've been, where we're going, and what our involvement looks like moving forward. Because there's just some things that don't seem to be in keeping with, I'll call it East County and certainly Wood Village in terms of some of the template things and other partners in that seem to be wanting to steamroll their ideas. So more on that to come, but certainly just kind of priming you on that. We'll see that in the next meeting, some more detail. Want to really remind you about, we have got our meeting with the Grand Ronde this Thursday, 10 a.m. here. Want to thank Council President Rios Campos connecting us with the natural leaders who are doing the catering. So if you've been to the events with them, the food's going to be great. That'll be at 11:30. And then we're ending the day with a tree planting at 12:30 in our Arboretum in honor of Catherine Harrison and her work with the Grand Ronde. So kind of that first hour, hour and a half, general updates and discussion, lunch, and then a tree planting. And then we have Pumpkin Fest this Saturday. The event itself starts at 11. It runs from 11 to 2, and certainly volunteers. Caroline will be sending out an email with, if you're interested in volunteering, when that is. But we've got trunk or treating, we've got a petting zoo, our pumpkin patch. Starbucks is actually pitching in beverages and things. We've got inflatable axe throwing and archery. We've got taekwondo demonstrations, disc golf demonstrations. So pumpkin bowling. So a lot for people to do. So even if we hopefully don't run out of pumpkins and other supplies early, but if we do, there's still a lot of activities for everyone. And the weather's looking okay. I don't want to say that too loud, just.
Don't anger him.
Then lastly, on your dais there, you were formally invited to that Dia de los Muertos celebration, which is part of the support we have provided for that event. So the first page is kind of the event flyer. Then the second page actually outlines each day and what activities take place when. So if you can make it, great. We did put in they got the check for the sponsorship and our logo and things. So they're appreciative of that. Other than that, what questions do you have?
Just really fast for the Grand Run. I have to leave a little early for a work meeting that I can't miss. And then the Pumpkin Fest, I'll be here early, but then Mikey has a soccer ceremony. So I'll probably take the early shift. Just FYI.
Sure, thank you. Any other questions for Greg? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, are you on?
I am, Mr. Mayor, and considering the lateness of the hour, I think it's time for my history of home rule in Oregon discussion. It's only 2 hours. No, I don't have anything.
No, dang it. Okay. With no questions for the city attorney, then mayor and council comments. I got one comment, and that's on homelessness. We need to stay current with that. That is a fluid topic. I work with Greg every week. We talk about it, and I ask him, how are we doing with the navigators? How are we doing with the staff meetings? And it is very fluid. It's frustrating. And I just had a meeting with Commissioner Stegman yesterday, and I'm trying to do as much as I can do to keep this in front of our commissioner and others, that we're not getting the services out here that we really need. So we're going to keep it, as I said, we need to do some periodic updates. Okay. It's yes.
The joint office just got a new director, right?
Yes, they did. Dan Fields.
Back in April, and
yeah.
We'll see where that leads.
Okay.
There's 3 meetings, and we've started doing 4 city mayor meetings with Dan Field and Commissioner Stegman and staff. We've had 1. I don't know where the next one is getting, still working on.
November 30th.
November 30th. Thank you. But so it looks like we're trying to concentrate time with the people that have control of the funds, but it is frustrating.
And I think, Dan, I think he's pushing a big rock uphill. He's got a current organization with its culture that he says he wants to change and needs to change. That is also then a subset of the larger county as a whole, which I don't even know how to navigate that bureaucracy. So, I mean, you've got a bureaucracy within a bureaucracy, and we're trying to navigate that.
And the last thing, since we're having a meeting with the Grand Ron and our Confederated Tribes, if you haven't yet, I just finished the New York Times best-selling book, Killers of the Flower Moon. And it is about the Oglala Indian Nation in the 1920s and the 30s and the horrific killings that took place to capture and to steal the land from Oglala Indians because they were sitting on millions of dollars worth of oil. So if you really want to read it's a nonfiction, but it's very interesting. It'll give you just another picture into the indigenous Indian population of our nation and how they have been treated over certain times and events. So last, if there's nothing else.
2 quick
Yes.
things. Just a reminder for the meeting on Thursday, if you have your beads, bring them.
Yeah, good.
And then I'm not sure how many of you all have received that email from the TriMet board, and tomorrow they're going to be doing a breakfast reception and then a board meeting following that. I think the mayor and I are joining that, but I think that's a huge effort. As they're expanding their services in 2025, to focus out here in East County. So they are making some big changes. So they're going to extend the 25, which runs on Gleason from Gateway all the way through Mount Hood, going in front of the Reynolds High School. So that's a huge one. And then there's some other projects coming on board, but looking at the flagship library as well, I think the other focus area is going to be 223rd and ensuring that that is an access point that our residents have to access that facility as well. So
Rio Campus, Councilor Rio Campus has been asked to speak there. And so he'll have an opportunity to really drive home the 223rd route that would be, essential for our folks.
Thanks, Ira.
Any other comments? We're adjourned.
Thank you.
You look great in those hats. They fit you.